Praise the Lord, saints and friends. This is Elder Adrian Hammond, and I am speaking of a particular sign that I've been just shown. Not that this is only for me to see, not just that I know something no one else does, not that type of thing, but in terms of realizing that in reading the Word of God, there are quite a few signs that point to the Lord's coming and the coming events of the tribulation period. And one of those signs I'm discovering is the worshiping of an idol. Now, before you say, well, Elder Hammond, there's always been worshiping idols. It's the type of idol that I'm trying to get to. For as you see, as you may well know, in the Old Testament, almost as far back as what you've seen at the very beginning, people leaving the worship of the Creator and instead worshiping the created. They look up in the sky and see the majesty of the sky, the ferocity of thunderstorms, the power of rivers and of the sea, and essentially the seemingly steadfastness of mountains and the gracefulness of trees and the various landscapes. They've seen the heavenly bodies, so to speak. They don't know who they are, but they seem that they can tell time by them and they can see the seasons by them. And seeing as they come in order, they begin to think that there must be something special, something divine about those things. So they create in their minds a picture as to what this deity looks like up close. And they go out into a forest and they take a tree, find a good tree, cut it down, and they begin to cut off the branches. They shape the wood and they're able to, with the sculpture of their hands, to create it a particular form, and then they overlay it with some type of precious metal, or they would take a stone and chip and chip and chip and chip and chip until they see a shape or a figure they could recognize. Then they'll bow down and worship it as a representation of what they believe is that power. So it's not that people have never done that before. They've done it for quite some time. Israel actually, when forsaking Yahweh, they stooped to that frequently. And the Lord had to chastise them in many occasions. And it wasn't that God wasn't patient with them, he was. But the sign of any trouble, they would fall right back into the same old things. So I'm not talking about the idols that men created. Not even talking about the idols that men become as part of a pantheon of gods. For instance, I'm sure the Israelites knew of the customs of the Egyptians, that a pharaoh was also thought of as a god, along with Osiris and Amun-Ra and all those things. That when a pharaoh knew that the day of their departure from this earth was approaching, they would commission that there would be a tomb made, or even before then, so that if it should happen to them, let's say they fall in battle, that their remains could be taken and entombed along with all those that they knew, which sometimes involved live creatures and live human beings. It was just their fate to be entombed along with that Pharaoh. You see, Roman emperors who, even though they worshipped other gods, most notably the ones they got from Greece, whereas Zeus became Jupiter, Hermes became Mercury, Ares became Mars, Aphrodite became Venus, and so on and so on and so on. But they were part of a pantheon of gods, part of a number. So I would figure that each succeeding emperor became a god of its own, and the pantheon of gods began to grow more and more. But you only need to worship one, and that was that. But I'm not talking about that either. There were those who essentially told people to worship them and under threat of death, forced them to do so. That was the idea of the first recorded abomination of desolation in the book of Daniel. That was foretold of what would happen later on when a Grecian king decided to make his claim to deity. But again, not a sole God, not a one singular God, but one among several or many. But see, today, and again, today may be a little off as well, but we tend to give that type of adoration. We won't call it worship, but we might as well. People who can sing or entertain well, better than others of their ilk. Those who perform on the athletic field with such distinction that you call them, you're a god of this, god of the hardwood. You're like essentially, if you can hit a ball over a fence and do it more times than anyone else, you're considered a god. And people may not fall down and worship them. A few do, but a lot of us do buy jersey. I'm not saying you can't buy a jersey. I'm not saying you can, but you put him in hallowed spots in your house. Don't touch it. That's my shrine to my hero. Now you're starting to get a little bit close, because now the person's alive. Not necessarily a king, but someone who you admire for their abilities. And you put them on a pedestal, which is why it's often so very tough when someone is found to be morally deficient in some area. I remember, I was going to use one star. Many of you in Los Angeles know this person or knew this person. His name was Kobe Bryant. Now, I will admit, that's one of my favorite basketball players. But he's not a god to me. But people put him up so high because of the exploits he did on the basketball court, things that they had not seen before, at least since the greatest or the GOAT, which is Michael Jordan, and of course there are others. When he was accused and it was found that he did have extramarital fling with this young lady, and there was accusations of rape or whatever, he fell down hard. People began to denigrate him, cut him off, which was then made surprised that he actually made a comeback and become greater in his later years than he was in his former, because of his persistence, because of his excellence, his commitment to excellence. So when he died, all this feeling of remorse, they really did give him the tribute that would be, some cases, the same as one would do a god. But I think these particular instances of giving undue, I'm not saying you can't applaud someone for what they've done. I'm not saying that you can not have favorite singers or players. But what I am saying is that when someone begins to be, you can't tell anyone any different, that this person is nothing but a human being that has demonstrated great ability in one thing. Now you're beginning to get to a point whereas you're starting to be cultivated. You're starting to be groomed, so to speak, to bow to the ultimate idol, the one who will demand that you worship him above anybody else, the one who will require you to bow down to him, where even the inanimate object that you would make of him, as of his likeness, will seem to move, will seem to have qualities that they're living, that it's living, as well as show forth a degree of obstinacy, that you're obstinate, that it's obstinate to the very idea of God that exists other than this person. And if you don't believe it, you will die. We see the things coming into place. You see that people will take leaders and say they can do no wrong. That is frightening on the way for this to happen. I'm not going to name names here, because there'll be people that will dispute what I'm saying and feel as though I'm picking on someone. But I'm not. I'm just telling you to watch the signs. That if you give a person unrivaled adulation. And you feel that anyone that says anything against them is of the devil, is foolish. And this person can essentially ascend above anyone and everyone. They don't care how much Christianity you may have. That person now is becoming your God. And the fact that, to add to this, science is beginning and is well on its way to creating objects that can move on their own, that can commit actions on their own, that can actually be seen as lifelike, that can do exactly what the scriptures are prophesying, of saying that that person can end up being that being, or that statue, or that whatever you were made, that particular thing can actually cause the death of those who don't believe it. That's in the grasp of what we can do now. So understand that the only one who we worship, that we say can do no wrong, the only one to whom we pay allegiance to, is not a political leader, not a leader of any world nation, not an entertainer, not an athletic icon, not a leader of industry or a company, but it can only be Jesus. Because only he is called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Everything else is a fake. But we're getting to that point where we're going to worship, and we're finding it easier and easier and easier to do that. Saints, look up, for redemption draws nigh. For if we should see that person, and we see people falling down, just know you missed something, and it's time to flee. God bless you. In Jesus' name.